Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carl Hayden, and I am the chairman of the Rockefeller Institute of Government. And I am delighted to welcome you to this forum on foundation aid. This is the third in a series, and we're particularly grateful to the school business officers who've been of immense help, not only to the Board of Regents and State Education Department, but also the State University of New York. It's a terrific organization. We thank you. I used to say when I had an occasion to make a stump speech that I thought that the school aid formula was an accretion of good ideas. Now, I'm not entirely convinced that that's true, but I think that's a decent starting point for any conversation about something as important and as simultaneously opaque as the school funding formula. Deborah will tell you that some time ago, one of the commonplaces around here were that there were only 3 people in the state of New York who understood the state aid formula, and the strength of the state education department derived from the fact that we had 2 of them. And Ruth Hanahan was our star and Deborah's mentor. Foundation aid really speaks to the subject of the extent to which we're going to be fair with the most deserving of our children and construct an equitable system of school finance. And so this becomes a vastly important conversation, and I am delighted that Bob Bullock and his colleagues have put together this wonderful panel, and we're just immensely excited that you're here and look forward to a very stimulating conversation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mike Borges. I'm the Executive Director of the Association of School Business Officials. And this is our, really actually our 4th year of putting on the School Finance Symposium. We've covered topics ranging from school spending to the tax cap last year. And as of course this year, the panel's discussion is going to be focused on foundation aid. And the reason that is the case is that back in January of this year, when Senate Majority Leader John Flanagan said that the legislature wasn't going to leave town until they dealt with the GEA, that I started thinking about, well, what should we do if GEA does end up going away? And, you know, the attention will focus on foundation aid going forward. So back in February, I had a conversation with Debra Cunningham, our Deputy Director of Education and Research, to talk about creating a foundation aid task force made up of school business officials from around the state. And we put together a very distinguished 17-member panel from school districts across the state to come together and talk about what foundation aid should look like going forward. And I think they did a yeoman's job, and over a very difficult subject matter with differences of opinion. But in the end, we came up with a consensus on what foundation aid should look like going forward. And we released that report last week, and we've gotten some good press, some op-ed pieces in the Rochester Democratic Chronicle and the Albany Times-Union. And recently I was on Susan Arbetter's Capital Pressroom, as well as Liz Benjamin's Capital Tonight, talking about it. So I want to just thank the members of the Foundation Aid Task Force for the work that they did, and for the Rockefeller Institute and Bob for collaborating with us once again on the School Finance Symposium. And it's been a very fruitful and productive relationship, and we look forward to expanding upon that going forward. So without much ado, our great moderator for today is Susan Arbetter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is an interactive program, and it's a rather lengthy program. And what we're going to do is take some questions from you toward the end of the program. At 2 o'clock, we're going to send some folks around to collect the cards. You should have picked up a card that was on your seat, and there should be a pen there as well. So if you have questions, write them down. At 2 and 2:30, we'll go around and collect them. So how this is going to go is like this. We have these 5 experts here, and I want to give each of you a chance to sort of give us a pocket look, a pocket bio of who you are and why this is such an important topic. And I thought we could start with Michael Griffith.
My name is Michael Griffith. I work for the Education Commission of the States. We're a national organization out of Denver. I've worked on school finance now for about 20 years. And I would say it's very important to take a look at this right now because things are changing in this country. And things are changing in your state, and your formula hasn't really changed in a while. And you need to have a formula that's able to be flexible, to address these types of issues. And you need to constantly look at your formula kind of like you constantly work on a garden. Going back, checking it out, retooling it. Over time, you start to see inequities happen within funding formulas, not intentional, but they just sort of happen. So it makes a lot of sense to go back now and take a really good look at your formula here in New York and think about changes you need to make.
Next up, we have a professor from Syracuse, John Yinger.
Hi, I'm John Yinger from Syracuse. I teach in public administration and economics, and I've been studying school finance with a focus on New York for a very long time. The thing to remember is that the school districts in this country are creatures of the state, and that's true in New York as in any other place. And the state is responsible for the outcomes in school districts. The Constitution, as our courts have said, requires certain levels of equity in the school system. And one of the main tools that the state has to ensure that kind of equity is the state aid formula. And I agree very much with what Mike said, that the state aid formulas are something you have to keep up with. Things have changed. There are important issues that need to be resolved. There's some complicated things in state aid formulas that have to be thought about, and I think it's wonderful that we're having a conversation about it today. Thank you.
Thank you. Regent Jim Tallon.
Susan, thank you. Jim Tallon, member of the Board of Regents and chair of the Subcommittee on State Aid. I'm in my 15th year as a member of the Board of Regents. I succeeded Regent and Chancellor Hayden when he stepped down in 2002 or thereabouts. Earlier in my life, I spent 19 sessions as a member of the legislature, member of the State Assembly representing Binghamton and Eastern Broome County. In that capacity, spent many good days in this room, thinking back to my friend Dick Dathan and the work of the Rockefeller Institute. So this is a little bit of a return to some comfortable and common space for me. In my day job, I'm the president of United Hospital Fund of New York, which is a modest analytic shop and small philanthropy focused on healthcare policy issues. And so in my day job, I do healthcare. My avocation is the Board of Regents, and I tried to focus on the state aid formula along with the other subjects that come before the board.
So between education and healthcare, what percentage of the state budget is that?
A lot. Well, no, it's there's a $20 billion spend on school aid, and going over to the Medicaid side of the budget, that holds at about all funds budget is between 55 and 60 billion. Roughly half of that's federal. It used to be that a quarter was state, a quarter was local. In recent years, we're up to about between a third and 40% of that money is state dollars now.
Thank you. Debra Cunningham of NYSASBO.
Thank you, Susan. I'm Debra Cunningham. I'm Director of Education and Research for the New York State Association of School Business Officials. I worked for a long time for the New York State Education Department, and I'm proud to work with the business officials that every day work around the state, using resources to improve the education of the children of the state of New York. Why is this topic important? Well, the way I think of it, it's really important to realize the potential of education. In recent years, education has seen both success and challenges. And if we're going to solve our most challenging education problems, this is going to take resolve, focus, and, well, yes, funding. And see. One of the successes is the improvements in our four-year graduation rate. We see that all students at this over a 5-year period, the rate grew 9% for a total of 78% of students graduating in 4 years. For our minority students, this rate of change was even greater, 14% for black students and 18% for Hispanic students, for a total graduation rate of 65%. This change is good, yet too many students do not graduate, and student needs are growing. Data from the last several years shows that student poverty has grown almost 3% statewide, and in all parts of the state except the already impoverished large city school districts, it has grown even larger by up to 8%.
Deborah, you might want to wait until Suzanne gets introduced.
I'm just doing, we're doing it in order. I'm not going through the whole thing.
She knows what she's doing.
I'm saying why this is important, and I just wanted to show some data as part of it. The number of students with disabilities increased 11%, and the number of English language learners increased a whopping 45%. So the challenge before us is, how do we continue the success we have had with growing student needs? We must understand those needs and meet them fully, head on. This forum is going to be a start of a conversation about maximizing funding to support student opportunity and success. So that's why I think it's important.
Thank you. So Suzanne Slack, tell us a little bit about who you are and why this is such an important conversation.
Thank you, Susan. Good afternoon. I'm Suzanne Slack, the Chief Financial Officer for the Syracuse City School District. Syracuse is the smallest of the Big Five districts, so of all the urban centers in New York State, we are the smallest. It's New York City, Yonkers, Syracuse, Rochester, and Buffalo, kind of following the path of the thruway. My background a little bit is I'm actually from the private sector. I spent many years in public accounting, the garbage industry, which was fun and exciting, and the dairy industry. And I became interested in education because with a job in finance, going home at night, it's always very important to me to feel good about the work that I do and know that I'm making a difference. So being in agriculture, being in the environmental industry, and certainly in education provides that. This topic today is near and dear to my heart. Like many of you, I have children that are in the education system currently, and properly funding makes all the difference in the world. Since we've had the foundation aid formula established in 2007, think about all the things that have changed. Many of you don't have a key anymore to start your car, you push a button. Things like that have changed in education as well. The state has increased the assessment requirements for students. The graduation requirements have changed. The bar has been raised not only for our students but for our teachers and educators as well over these last 10 years. In addition to that, what's happening in the communities around our schools is changing as well. We have more significant pockets of poverty here in New York State than we did 10 years ago. In fact, in Syracuse, there was a recent study that showed that we have one of the highest concentrations of poverty on the west side of the city. That has a significant impact on the children when they come into school. They're not ready to begin learning math and algebra and ELA. They're trying to deal with a traumatic situation at home, something that was very uncomfortable that they saw on the way to school, and the ongoing stresses in their life from living in extreme generational poverty. So with the changes that the state has made and the changes in our economy and our community, I think now is the time for us all to really sit down and look at the state aid formula. We have an opportunity to turn some of the inequities of the formula into equities for these children.
Thank you.